Hey everyone, welcome to today's presentation in Zoomtime Knowledge. This is a free public presentation series provided by the James Madison University Lifelong Learning Institute. Today I'm joined by some of my friends, Sue G, who you just heard from before we got the meeting underway. Sue is our program assistant. She will be managing the technology. In the background, if you need any assistance, just send Sue a chat message. She'll be able to help you. I'm also joined by our good friend, Jayne Rynar. Jayne was born and raised in New York City before moving to the Shenandoah Valley in 2007. Her career spanned 35 years in the New York public school system. I know she's a friend to many of you who are connected here today. But Jayne's also an outdoor enthusiast and has served as both an LLI instructor and a volunteer committee member. And I think, Jayne, you give us a presentation like this maybe once a year. We find out where your travels have recently led you to. And today we're going to be learning about Cuba. The title of the presentation here, Cuba, Magnificently Mysterious. Jayne, welcome. Whenever you're ready, we're seeing your slide presentation. Feel free to begin.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I've seen names of my friends, so I'm very pleased that you're all here today to go on this extraordinary journey with me. I chose to do this presentation because my trip to Cuba in January of this year it impacted me tremendously. Not only the beauty of the country, but the people that I met, the people that I dealt with. So I'd like to share those beautiful experiences with you today. Cuba, okay? Many of you probably have questions about the country. Can we legally travel to Cuba? How can we travel to Cuba? What kind of restrictions are there? Yes, we can travel legally to Cuba. Both the Cuban government and our government have placed tremendous restrictions on Americans traveling to Cuba, but we can circumvent that. And we can go within 12 different categories. And the way that we had traveled was through the category of to benefit the Cuban people, which actually means that we, according to our government, are not allowed to stay in any government-owned hotels. We're not allowed to eat in any government-owned restaurants, nor are we allowed to shop in any government-owned shops. However, we were able to stay in Cuban homes because we're benefiting the Cuban people. The homes we stayed in were all certified by the Cuban government. They're all extremely beautiful, wonderful, and you get the opportunity to meet the families. So that was an incredible experience. They are called casas particulares, and what that really translates to is our B&B system. So we stay in a room, we have our breakfast, sometimes we've eaten dinner at the house, but you get to interact with the people. We were also allowed to eat in restaurants that were owned by Cuban people. So that to us was very, very encouraging to see that they are allowing Cubans to have their own businesses. And as far as shopping, that's kind of limited, but we were able to purchase some things in shops that were owned by the Cuban people. There are restrictions once you're in the country. You must have a detailed itinerary, and that you get when you go with your group. The money situation, there are no credit cards in Cuba. You can't whip out your American Express card and purchase something. Everything is done in cash. Speaking of cash, as an American, when you exchange American dollars, there's an extra 10% that's imposed on that transaction. So you're actually paying the 3%, which is their normal exchange fee, and then you have to pay an additional 10%. But to circumvent that, Karen, Lee, and Karen traveled with me, we purchased Canadian dollars here in the United States, and we used that. So we only paid the 3%. There's two different currencies. There's the CUP, the Cuban peso, which is only allowed for Cuban nationals. And then there's the CUC, which is the currency that only foreigners can use. You cannot use their currency, they cannot use yours. But it was fine because the exchange rate was 1 CUC per dollar. It was very easy. There are other restrictions in terms of we can't use their transportation, they can't use our transportation, but the way we traveled, we didn't need that. So before I begin, I'd like to do a shout out to 4 very, very special people. First, Ellie Arroyo, I know you're here and listening. Thank you so much for giving us the trip of a lifetime. It was absolutely extraordinary. You gave us the best itinerary in the world, and you know that I will travel with you again. And to her son, Jordan Diaz, who does your custom travel. Jordan, keep working on that Asia trip for us. And then, of course, to 2 very, very special friends that I've made in Cuba, to Rigoberto, who was our driver, and to Lorenzo, who was our guide, friends for life. And it's wonderful to be able to have been able to share these experiences with these 2 men because they just did the best job in the whole world. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart. So with that said, listo? Are we ready? Let's begin our journey. So, bienvenidos amigos, bienvenidos a Cuba. So what I said for those of you that don't speak Spanish is welcome friends and welcome to Cuba. So as you can see, this is a vintage car, which are very plentiful in Cuba. They have become like a landmark, and the men who own these cars treat them like they were their babies. They're beautiful, they're well managed, and just great cars. So that's how we traveled. We had a driver, and we traveled around Cuba. This was Rigoberto Delgado Vesquez. He was our driver. And this is Lorenzo Rodriguez Herrero, who was our guide. And this is the garden of one of the casas that we stayed in. You could see how beautiful it is. And these 2 guys are probably thinking, gosh, how are we going to handle these 2 crazy American women? Well, they did. They managed very well. They were terrific. Lorenzo is bilingual, and so there was absolutely no problem with using our English. And here we are in Rigo's car, Lorenzo, me, and Karen. This is at the very beginning of the trip. And you could see how beautifully maintained his car is. It was immaculate. We love traveling in there. And here's Rigoberto, very proud of his car. And this is his 1956 Ford. This car is 64 years old. Could you imagine? And look at the condition it is in. Rigo apparently restored the car himself. He had, I suppose he had some help with mechanics and some friends, but he actually did most of the restoration. He had shown us pictures of when he first purchased the car and what a mess it was. And this is how we traveled in Cuba, which was wonderful. We didn't have to get on and off tourist buses and whatever, and he just took us everywhere we went. Okay, first day. This is part of the panorama of La Habana, or Havana, as we call it. This is the Hotel Nacional, which is a landmark hotel, part of the bay. You could see even in here, part of the bay. The Capitol building. And this was taken from a beautiful building that we had lunch in that afternoon. This is the remainder of the cityscape. So you can see that La Habana is very populated. Many of the buildings are in excellent condition, but there, of course, are buildings that are not in such excellent condition. This building, the Edificio Fosca, was built in 1955, and it is the tallest building in Cuba. It is a 33-story building. It's a multi-purpose building with the El Torre restaurant at the top. El Torre means the tower. And this is the views that we had from that restaurant. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And this is the Malecón, or the seawall. And you could see how the waves just splash up against the seawall and splash over into the street. It's a beautiful sight. And people walk along the Malecón all day long and into the evening. It's very traditional to have your photographs taken there as well. And this is the Hotel Nacional that I pointed out previously. It was designed by a New York architecture firm, McKim, Mead, and White, and it was financed by the Citibank of New York. It was constructed in 14 months. That's amazing. The Hotel Nacional de Cuba is considered a symbol of history, culture, and Cuban identity. 87 years of history give prestige to the classic Art Deco, Roman, Moorish, and civilian style building. It has 457 rooms, views of the harbor, the seawall, and this Grand Hotel was declared a national monument and is inscribed in the World Memory Registry. It is truly amazing, amazing hotel. And here, Karen and I are enjoying a delicious lunch in the El Torre restaurant with the views, the panoramic views around. The food was absolutely extraordinary. I'm a vegetarian. Most of you know that I'm a vegetarian, but I didn't lack for anything. Everything was done so beautifully and proudly by the people that own the restaurant. I remember walking around and the different windows and taking in the city, and Lorenzo was explaining to us the different landmarks in the city and where this was and where that was, and it was just breathtaking to be up there. And then we went to something called Fuster Village. The celebrated Cuban artist, Jose Rodriguez Fuster, inspired by his time in Europe in 1975, converted his home in the dilapidated town of Jimenitas into this architectural landscape and museum. Although the focal center of the project is still his home, Tala Estudio Jose Festa, the whole neighborhood is a kaleidoscope of intrigue, intricate mosaics and sculpture known as Fustalandia. And you could see here, I mean, it's all mosaic. It's just fascinating to watch it. It's a 3-story structure, and there's just so many different things to look at. It's kind of like very gaudy style, but it was certainly a terrific adventure for us. And here you could see, Karen took a picture of me looking at one of the structures and all the different mosaics. This was the second floor, again, more mosaics. And then there was some artwork. He looked to the inspiration of Picasso and Gaudi, and Fuster was known as the Picasso of the Caribbean. I guess you could see why. And here's the Hotel Nacional and the Malecón, and part of the harbor. La Habana is surrounded by 5 major plazas. And so I'd like to take you to see all of those different plazas. Plaza de San Francisco. It was founded in 1628. It is one of the oldest squares in Havana. It is named after the nearby Convento de San Francisco de Asís, a Franciscan convent built between 1575 and 1591. It's amazing. And if you look at the architecture, you know, Havana has just the most amazing architecture. It's one of the things that I was so anxious to see when I was there. And this plaza was just one of the most beautiful. Plaza Cathedral de San Cristobal. And you could see here in the 2 pictures the ornate design and architecture of this particular cathedral. This plaza is one of the five main squares in La Habana. Following the construction of the cathedral in 1727, it became the site of some of the city's grandest mansions. It houses the Museo de Arte Colonial, the art museum, the Colonial Art Museum. But just looking up at the structure, if just looking up at the structure, you could see how ornate it is and how magnificent it is. Plaza Vieja, which translates into Old Plaza. It's quite beautiful. You could see the colorful architecture. This plaza was laid out in 1559, and Plaza Vieja is the most architecturally eclectic square where Cuban Baroque couples with Gaudi-inspired Art Nouveau. It was originally used for military exercises, but later used as an open-air market. Another plaza, the Armas, it was built in the 1600s, and it was originally used for military exercises. In the mid-1700s, it became popular with the rich Cubans to have strolls and carriage rides. The plaza is lined with Baroque buildings and houses a popular book market. Very interesting book market. We loved browsing through all the books and the old relics that they showed, that the vendors had. And this is one of the lesser known plazas, de Cristo de Buen Viaje, the plaza of the Good Voyage of Christ, as best as I can translate it. This plaza was built in the mid-17th century and was created around Ermita de Humiladera, I hope I am pronouncing it right in Spanish, by a Franciscan order. It has as its function the 12th or final station of the cross. It is in the Baroque style of architecture. We did not visit this particular plaza, so this is a stock photo that I took off the internet, but I wanted to introduce you to the 5 different plazas that surround the city. This is Havana. This is what you see, horse-drawn carriages, one of the means of transportation. Just a typical Cubana doing her food shopping. But it was so interesting to just look at the people and watch them and their daily lives and how they interact with each other. It was lovely. And here's some more beautiful architecture. And not so beautiful architecture, but that's Havana. You know, you have buildings that have been restored to their original beauty, and then you also have your crumbling buildings that are not as lovely, but it brings a kind of romantic feel to the city. And this is more Havana beauty, the beautiful, beautiful architecture. And the balconies. I mean, I could live there. And this is the Capitol building and some newer cars, probably Russian-made cars. The Capitol building is absolutely stunning. Across the harbor is the area called Casablanca, the White House. And here are some pictures. In this slide, and then we will glimpse some of the sights of Casablanca. This barrio, neighborhood, offers stunning views of the city, harbor, city street, and El Morro. Whoops, I goofed. Sorry. Okay. The Castillo de los Tres Santos Reyes Magnos. That's the 3 kings, and great 3 kings, the castle. And that was completed in the early 17th century, and it guarded the eastern entrance to the Havana harbor. And this is the El Morro fort, which you probably see in many pictures that show of Havana. It's very popular. It sits right on the water, right outside. And here you could see some of the city views from Casablanca. This is the beautiful Capitol building, some of the ships in the harbor, and some of the streets that are in Casablanca. Need I say what this is? The sculpture of Christ de Havana. Since 1589, the sculpture made of Italian marble has been a religious symbol throughout its history. It is magnificent and huge, and Karen and I were pretty much awe of the size and the beauty of this sculpture and the park surrounding it too. And here is just a compilation of some lovely shots of Cuba, of Havana. And again, you have your Capitol building, the National Museum of Art, the Grand Prado, a ration shop, a cigar shop on Obispo Street, and this is Obispo Street. It's the longest street in Havana. But you can see some of the buildings, the architecture is just absolutely magnificent. And Lorenzo was explaining how ration shops work. You get ration cards, and you can purchase items through your ration cards. Quite different from how we shop. The Grand Prado is a promenade in Havana which divides Old Havana from Central Havana, and that's the Grand Prado. Obispo, or the Bishop's Street, is the longest street in Havana. It is where Hemingway wrote many of his novels. And this is the interior of the Capitol building. This is a gold statue inside and the beautiful architecture on the ceiling. And this is the Bacardi rum building. It's quite lovely. It's Art Deco style. And Chopin, this was in San Francisco Square. He's a bronze statue. He's quite beautiful, and we made very close friends that day. I was very elated to meet him. And then we have Revolution Square. Okay, this is where Castro gave many of his speeches, and you can see this beautiful, beautiful depiction of Che Guevara. This is where he gave many of his speeches up on the steps. Some of the buildings surrounding the square, and Karen and I in an Edsel, okay? We did a city tour in an Edsel, which was quite amazing. We felt like Thelma and Louise when we were in that car. It was quite amazing how beautifully restored that car was. But Revolution Square was very inspiring because of its historical implications. It's where so much happened in the revolution and, you know, after the revolution. And then we visited the little village of Cojimar, where Hemingway wrote The Old Man in the Sea. He was inspired. This is a bust of Hemingway. This is part of his boat, the Pilar. And then we visited this most magnificent organic garden, and it was amazing. We were so inspired how the men that ran this garden used whatever they had for irrigation, for watering, for fertilizing. They would take big oil drums and cut them in half and use them as planters. They would cut off the tops of small water bottles and invert them in the ground for watering, for irrigation. It was amazing. They grow herbs and different spices there. And then we ate in this incredible restaurant, Ajico, and we had a cooking class there. And they took us in the back and they showed us how to cook different Cuban dishes. And then we ate, of course. It's an absolutely adorable little town or section of Havana that was very charming, and because of the history with Hemingway, it made it even more charming for us. And of course, the food was absolutely delicious. And Hemingway's home. So it's called Finca Vieja, or it's called Lookout Farm in English, and this is the lookout tower. And I climbed up there, and it gave me a very, very beautiful perspective of Havana, the cityscape. And this is just one of the rooms in the home. You're not allowed to go into the home. You can view the interior of the home through the doors and the windows, but it's beautifully, beautifully restored and kept. And you could see, you know, his hunting stuff and his books, and it was just really beautiful to be there. There was so much history involved. And he was a great friend of Fidel Castro, by the way, which I was not aware of. And they had a wonderful friendship. And his home is just absolutely magnificent. The gardens around the home are very beautiful as well. And from Havana, we traveled first to the Viñales Valley, which I'll show you later, but then after we went to Viñales, we came back to Havana, and then we traveled down to this beautiful, beautiful little city of Cienfuegos. And this is the Tomás Terry Theater. It was built in 1887 through 1889. And this is an arch dedicated to the Venezuelan workers in the Jose Martes Plaza. And Cienfuegos is really a French colonial town. The theater had the most beautiful frescoes. It is now being restored. It has 950 seats. And Karen and I were free to roam around and check everything out. And it was quite beautiful. And I remember sitting in one of the seats, just looking up at the beautiful ceiling and the intricacy of the painting. It was lovely. And of course, this is the arch that's dedicated to the workers. And you could see the beautiful architecture of the theater on the exterior of it. And this is Punta Gorda Palacio de Valle Cienfuegos. The city was named for Jose Cienfuegos. The main industrial center, it was one of the main industrial centers in Cuba. It was dubbed La Perla del Sur, the Pearl of the South, and it is a restored sugar baron home. It was built in 1917 by a sugar industry millionaire. It has an eclectic mix of architectural styles that include Moorish, Gothic, Baroque, and Spanish. Cienfuegos was one of the main industrial centers, as I said, and it has a beautiful bay over here, and we were able to eat in a restaurant at the top of this beautiful building. The architecture is very, very ornate, as you can see, a little overpowering, but you could see the amount of work that was put into building this beautiful structure. Trinidad. Okay. If anybody wants to know one of my favorite places in Cuba is Trinidad. I had the time of my life this day because I connected with some Afro-Cuban musicians. Lorenzo took Karen into the nearby church, but I was so intrigued by the music that I just stayed outside, and I was very impressed by this group of Cuban men. You could see their instruments. There was drums and there's guitars, and very typical Cuban instrument that they also used. It was for men. And Trinidad is a colonial town. It's known for its music, and it's known for its beautiful cobblestone streets. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1998. They were so impressed with how I was reacting to their music that one of the gentlemen asked me to come over and sit down. And in my Spanglish, because I can't understand Cuban Spanish, I was able to tell him that I could play some drums. So they invited me over to play the drums here. And of course, you could see from my face that I was having the time of my life. Their music was absolutely amazing, and it was probably one of my best days in Cuba. I loved it. I think what was so important for me was the connection that I made with these gentlemen. You know, our lifestyles are so different. Everything about us was so different, and yet the music brought us together. And that, for me, when I travel, I love to make, here I go again. I love to make these connections. I'm sorry, the mouse is very sensitive. Okay. These are some of the pictures of Trinidad. This is the Plaza Mejor, which is the main plaza. It's at night. It's an old San Francisco convent. And these are some of the city scenes. I know when they drove us up to the Casa Particulares that we were staying in, Karen and I were saying, oh my God, where are we staying? This looked awful. But once we went into the structure, into the building, it was unbelievable. The house was absolutely stunning that we stayed in, and the family was wonderful. And the city was so vibrant and so colorful. I love Trinidad, and I would love to go back and really visit with Trinidad one more time. Trinidad is fun. This is Rigoberto and me doing a little salsa dancing on cobblestone streets. I have to tell you, it was quite difficult. But we had a great time that night, and it just made the trip even more exciting for me because I was able to make that connection with Rigo, who does not speak English. But we had fun listening to the music and dancing together. He's quite an amazing man. And this is where in the evenings they have musicians playing up here. And you could come sit on the steps, you could sit down here on the tables and chairs and listen and dance to the music. My heart of hearts, this is the best of the best. This is one of the musicians that I connected with when I was in Trinidad, in that group of Afro-Cuban musicians. I believe his name was Cedric. But we were able to communicate a little bit in my Spanglish. And at the end, when I was getting up to leave, he invited me over and he sang a beautiful Spanish love song to me. And you could see the look on his face, and you could see the amazing look on my face. And for me, this is what travel is all about, making that human connection, not just going from site to site to site to site, but to connect to the people. And the Cuban people are just warm and friendly and fun and loving. So this picture is probably one of my favorite pictures of all time. And I use it on my screen on my laptop. This is my homepage picture. It was wonderful. So when I go back to Trinidad, I would love to meet him again. It was an amazing experience. Then we went down to the valley of the sugar mills, the Valle de Ingenios. This is the center of sugar production from the late 18th century until the late 19th century. The Spaniards introduced sugarcane to the island in 1512. And Cuba became the world's foremost producer of sugar production from the late, go again, that mouse, sorry, from the late 18th century into the late 19th century. And this tower was erected in 1750, and it allowed the sugar barons to really observe what was going on in the fields and how the slaves were working or not working. And it was used to also control the slaves. This tower was erected in 1750. Lorenzo and I probably climbed up, I think, to somewhere around here. And that's as far as we went. But the views from there, from the whole valley, is just absolutely stunning. And Viñales is definitely in that area. It was one of the most beautiful places in Cuba. And this is the Viñales Valley. So when we were there, we went to visit a coffee plantation and a tobacco plantation. Now you could go and visit by cart or by horse. And so this was my horse, Black. His name was Black. And of course, I fell in love with him. The Viñales Valley is the westernmost part of the country of Cuba. It is a karstic depression, which is formed by the dissolution of soluble rocks and is characterized by underground drainage systems with sinkholes and caves. And tobacco and coffee plantations dot the area, as well as honey and rum production. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You could see this is how they farm, horse and cart. Very, very common in Cuba to use the horse. I think it's probably the most used method of transportation, other than the old cars at Havana. But my horse was wonderful. Karen went by cart. I have to say that, Karen, sorry. And here we go. This is the Cuban taxi, right? This is how they get around. And here is a Soviet tractor. Vintage, obviously, and not terribly useful. The old Soviet tractors and farm equipment is really pretty dilapidated, and we saw farmers using oxen and plows to plow their fields. But I thought this was so intriguing to see. I mean, even though there are cars, taxis obviously, this is how most of the people went around in the Viñales Valley that, you know, where we stayed. It was absolutely charming. And this is a prehistoric mural. It was a project started by Fidel Castro to represent the evolution of life in a natural sense in Cuba. You can see 12 pieces in the evolutionary process of men and animals and the Sierra de los Órganos Mountains. So all of this was hand painted, and it's hard to see, but you can see the figure probably of an Indian, prehistoric men, marine life, some more marine life, birds, and it takes you from very prehistoric times to more contemporary times, and it was a really stunning project. They explained to us how the painters got up to the very top and how dangerous it was for them to start painting all the way on the top of this mountain. But I remember Karen and I just lying down on the grass and just staring at it, just trying to absorb the beauty and the magnitude of what we were seeing. It was amazing. And then they took us to the Sorolla Orchid Gardens. It was winter when we traveled in January, and so there weren't very many orchids. However, it was an absolutely stunning botanical gardens. It's 7.5 acres. The Spaniard Tomás Felipe Camacho created the garden in 1943 to honor his daughter. His library is dedicated to orchids and ornamental plants and is still considered to be the best in Cuba. And here you can see some of the fruits that were offered. There were a few blooming orchids, but basically it was a lot of green. And we had a tour, and she explained about the different plant life, the different trees. It was just absolutely stunning. Then we traveled down to the Bay of Pigs, the infamous Bay of Pigs. And it's in the Zapata Peninsula. And this part of Cuba has many rocks forming caves both above and underground. And it is the largest swampland in the Caribbean. And Karen and I can attest to the heat and humidity. It was very hot, very humid. But we did take a tour of this jungle area, and you could see the beautiful pools of water and how beautifully crystal clear they are, some of the underground waterways, little tunnels of rocks. And this was our guide. And it was very, very, very interesting. It was quite an interesting area, but of course, very swampy with lots of mosquitoes. And Cuba would not be complete without its amazing vintage cars, its means of transportation for the people who live in the different towns, and the way people have to farm. It was very eclectic. It was very moving. It was very interesting to see how resilient the people are, how innovative they are. With the little that they have and what they can accomplish with that little bit. It truly inspired me. It really did inspire me. And I think about our life here in the United States and how easy things are, even with COVID today, and how difficult it is for these people to manage their daily lives. But they do it with love, they do it with smiles, they do it with music, and they're just amazing, amazing people. Friends. Okay, this is the connection that I talked about. Of course, everybody knows Karen Lee, Lorenzo Rodriguez, our guide, his mom, Teresa, and me. One of the most amazing things about the team members for this agency that we traveled in, they like to take you back to their homes to meet their families. Family life for Cubans is very, very important. And he wanted us to meet his mom and to see his home and his farm animals. And it was a truly inspiring day for us. And his mom doesn't speak English, but we were able to communicate sometimes through video, my Spanish, and then he translates, Lorenzo will translate for her into English. And we still have this beautiful friendship and beautiful connection, and that means so much to me. They're an amazing family. And these are some of my sweetest memories. Lorenzo with one of their cats, his mom with one of the bunnies, they raise rabbits. The bar Floridita, which is extremely famous with tourists. Cuban coffee, which can't compare to any other coffee. And this was me on the day we had to leave, going back home. It was sad to leave. I could have stayed maybe another 2 weeks and really seen the country more in depth. The trip that Ellie had planned for us, because we traveled to so many different areas in such a short period of time, it was only 12 days, we just got highlights of everything. And I know for sure that I will return. I definitely will return, and I want to see the eastern part of the country. I would love to go back to Viñales and really absorb that area even more. I want to reconnect with the friends that we've made, that I made there. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience for me. And so my special thanks to Ellie Arroyo from My Cuba Travel. Ellie, besos y abrazos. Lorenzo, our guide, who has become a dear friend. Rigoberto Delgado Vasquez, our driver, who took such good care of us, such a gentleman, and we felt totally safe driving around Cuba with him. And of course, my dear friend, my best travel buddy and friend, Karen Lee. And that ends my journey in Cuba. But there will be more, so keep watching, and maybe next year I'll be able to present another video or presentation on Cuba. I do hope to go back. I was planning a trip to bring some people down in January. Of course, with COVID, that's not possible. Ellie and I had developed a beautiful 2-week itinerary. And so I'm thinking possibly next, well, not this coming winter, but the winter afterward of 2022, to bring a very small group down. So if anybody's interested in exploring this amazing country, please let me know. You can contact me either my email or texting me with my phone number. You can get all that information from Sue, and I would be glad to take a group down with me. So thank you all so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Hey, Jayne, thank you. I'm back over here. I know you and I we're broadcasting a little differently today. You came down to the Ice House. We're in different rooms. It's amazing how we can be connected. But I also want to thank you. I know a lot of us during this time, the pandemic has interrupted our normal lives, our normal routines. We've canceled travel programs, and what a gift you've given us to be able to take this virtual tour here today and revisit some of the places that you love to see. So what I would like to do now is there are a few questions in the chat window. Sue, you could go ahead and manage the microphones, give people permission to unmute themselves. But before we do that, Jayne, let's respond to the 3 questions we received by chat, since they came in first. The first one is from Herb. He said, when I saw the seawall, I wondered how climate change and rising seas are affecting Cuba. Did you witness that, or did you feel like the people there that you met thought that that was an issue for Cubans?
Not during the trip, but afterwards, discussion with, Lorenzo, we talk about these things quite a bit because he knows that I would love to come back to the country. And we discussed climate change, but I don't think, and I may be wrong, and Ellie, of course, I see you here, hi. I don't know if climate change is as big issue as it is for us. There's other issues in Cuba that are more pressing at this point. The embargoes, the restrictions, and all of that, and how that's impacting the people. I think that may be more of an issue, but I am not 100% sure. However, I can find out. And if you'd like to, I could, get back to me, and I'll be sure to come up with an answer for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jayne. The next question comes from our friend Vanessa. Vanessa, thanks for joining us. The question is, were local Cubans able to freely talk to you both? What conversations with them about their lives do you remember best or cherish? And did you have other conversations like that with your guides and driver? What do they have to say about their lives, circumstances, and history? That's a whole presentation itself, but what sticks out to you, Jayne, in your memory of the stories that locals shared with you?
Well, they do not talk about the government and the issues, and the issues between our 2 governments. That is not discussed at all. And of course, we met these people for the first time, and as I mentioned, Rigoberto does not speak English. So everything was translated through Lorenzo. We kept our conversations more aligned to what we were seeing and what he was teaching us. Subsequently, Lorenzo and I have become very close friends. We communicate a lot, and we discuss these issues. And he does discuss the horrible conditions right now in Cuba.
Oh, it's that horrible?
It's really bad. El Arroyo, who owns the company that we traveled with, does humanitarian relief aid, and Eric and I contribute to that financially. She supplies her team members' families with food and necessary items that we just take for granted, like toothpaste, toothbrushes, soap, oil, whatever. Packages have gone down since January. I think about 4 or 5 packages have gone down, both of food and that. That is the main issue right now due to the embargoes, and I don't want to get too political, but what our government is imposing on that country. And it's harming the people. It's not harming the government. So these are, areas that I've addressed with him, and he's now feels free enough to discuss them with me.
Jayne, we have another question, and then I do see some folks have their microphones unmuted. They will ask you verbal questions or provide comments directly. But this one from Libby. Libby says that she has a few slides that date back to the early 1950s. Those include her dad and a U.S. naval ship he sailed on that was able to dock in a harbor there. and then they brought back some things with them. It says, I suppose the U.S. Navy is no longer allowed to dock there anymore. Do you know if that's true?
I would think, yes, that's not, that is true. I think so. I don't know for 100% sure, but there's restrictions. And, now they won't even allow, cruise ships to dock there. None of our ships are allowed to dock there, recreational. I doubt highly if any of our naval vessels are allowed to dock there. Conditions between the two countries are very, very difficult at this point.
Jayne, do you mind if I chime in real quick?
Please, Ellie, she's the expert. Ellie Arroyo.
I'm sorry, I don't want to, but I just wanted to just share some things.
Please.
For Libby, yes, U.S., any type of U.S. military is not anywhere near the coast of Cuba. Obviously, the U.S. still maintains the Guantanamo Bay on the east side of the island, but that's only for military use by the U.S. government. As far as something that Jayne brought up, and thank you, Jayne, the situation is very critical in Cuba right now because the government, upon confirmation, and as a matter of fact, we had people that left 2 days before the country shut their borders. The government of Cuba decided to lock down the island in an effort to prevent COVID. So as a result of that, the other countries that really assist Cuba with food and supplies had to stop sharing supplies with the country. So right now they have an amazing hold on COVID. I think their numbers are under 4,000 since COVID started with a 12 million population country. But it has affected the food and supplies, which are some of the efforts that we do to help our team in Cuba. So thank you for bringing that up, Jayne, and thank you and Eric for contributing and helping us with that. But when they open, we hope that our tourism back into the country, which should happen very soon, well, if they want us there, if they want us
Of course
there.
they want us. Americans, are you sure they want Americans there with the COVID?
So anyway, thank you for letting me just chime in quick.
Oh, my pleasure, Ellie. Thank you.
I'd like to say something. I've been to Cuba twice in 2012 and 2013. And one of the things I'd like to mention is that our guide, this was on a Rhodes Scholar tour, a very small group of people. And our guide was very guarded in the things that he said about conditions, but it was very clear that he did say that many professionals worked in the areas where they could receive tips, and they did much better than those professionals who were getting the government wages.
Yes.
And I'd like to add, there was recently a good article just a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times about the conditions in Cuba now. And they had a very difficult time in the 90s with what they call the special period,
Exactly.
after the Soviets left. And then it sounds to me as if this is much like that. Just one other thing, that now for a few years with Obama changes to travel to Cuba, they were able to have a $2,000 per quarter remittances from the United States, from relatives and friends in the United States, and that has been changed to $1,000 per quarter. So that's one of the other things that's affecting the Cubans undoubtedly.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right about everything. As I said, we didn't discuss this when I was there. But over the past few months, becoming friends and establishing the trust, we do discuss different things like that. And, everything that you said is very true. And they are going through that very special time right now, again. And thanks to Ellie and, her organization, her travel agency, they have been very generous in supplying the people with just basic things that they need every day. But thank you for that input, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
I'm looking at the chat window. I think I've got everything there, but I noticed a few people had their microphones unmuted. They muted them again. Chips, you might be one of those that if you had a question, you can feel free to unmute your microphone, just join in. Anyone else? We do have a good amount of time here, so for conversation.
The tree that Eric babysat. Who's Eric?
Well, Jayne, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. It's very interesting. I was going to go when we weren't allowed because I was going to go through Canada. And as long as they don't stamp your passport, you're fine. And then, of course, my friend whose husband was an attorney pitched a fit and said she couldn't go. So, and that was about 25 years ago when we weren't allowed to go. You know, Americans weren't allowed there, but you could go through Canada or Mexico.
Well, Mexico has gotten very wise to this, and now they require our passports to be stamped.
Yeah.
That was a very, very
But
good
that
way to
wasn't
get
the way it
around.
was 25 years ago. But
Yeah.
I loved especially your Trinidad, and because I love music. So
Well, then you have to come on a trip.
absolutely.
Yes.
Sign me up, Scotty.
You got it, Sandy. You got it.
If anybody ever lets us in again. Oh, but thank you so much. It's always wonderful. Thanks.
And mojitos at your house the next time?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
or the daiquiris of famous Hemingway's daiquiri.
That's true. You make them good.
But I don't have a 6-toed cat to go with it, so. It was great, thanks. I'm off to the vet with the dog. Bye-bye. Excellent.
Thanks.
And I'm glad you and Karen seemed to have a wonderful time together. Great traveling companions.
She is. She really is a lot of fun to travel with, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, darling, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Jayne, one thing I love about that exchange with you and Sandy's a longtime member of our program, is just the familiarity. And you mentioned it in your presentation about meeting the people, being invited to participate in their community, but certainly that's at the heart of LLI too, this learning community that we bring together and that you're a part of, and sometimes it extends abroad. There's a question here that I just want to ask you. I'm not going to read it word for word, but do you have a story for us about involving babysitting Hemingway? Maybe anything involving Eric? Is it an inside joke? Is it a story? Is it a legitimate question?
That's an inside joke.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
I have no idea what you're talking about. No.
I was wondering if Eric was old enough to have babysat Hemingway.
Oh my goodness.
Eric? My Eric?
Inside joke.
I'll have to ask him when I get home. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's what I thought it might be, and I was like, I don't know how to translate if it didn't come through as it could. Other questions for Jayne or for Ellie, who's connected? I think Eric's connected too. But Eric didn't go with you, right, Jayne? It was you.
No, it's just the girls. Oh, yeah. No, just the ladies. No, Eric did not go. No.
And I know we have Karen connected too. So Karen, if you'd like to add anything, feel free to.
Yeah, I don't see her.
I'd like to recommend a movie that I saw a few years back in Waynesboro, Ghost Town to Havana, which is about a young baseball team from Oakland, California, that was able to visit Havana. And it's very insightful as far as the sociological makeup of 12, 13, 14-year-olds and their relationship with, you know, a culture that they're totally unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll have to keep that under my belt. Is it on Netflix?
I don't know. It was through the Arts Council and the director and everybody showed up in Waynesboro. So, I don't know where to go about finding it.
Yeah, I'll have to look at it, see if I can find that. Thank you.
Also, the Motorcycle Diaries.
Oh, yeah.
Fabulous movie about Che Rivera and Castro when they were younger, going through South America and working in hospitals and stuff. One of a cult favorite.
Yes.
Bye, dear.
Yeah,
Any other question? Oh,
I
sorry.
have one more comment. If there's, I was struck by an article that I came across since the COVID crisis. We know that Cuba has sent medical professionals to many places and offered to send to the United States after Katrina, but of course we turned them down. But they took a cruise ship with COVID passengers and took them off the ship and got them on buses to Jose Marti Airport and to the United Kingdom. And those passengers obviously were very grateful for that help. They were turned away from Miami.
Yeah. You know, Elizabeth, what you're saying is so true. And what I tried to express in this presentation is the governments are at odds.
Yeah.
Not the people.
Yeah. Right.
Not the people at all. I found that the Cuban people were so welcoming and so wonderful and warm and friendly and fun. And, you know, it's the governments that cause issues. And I'm not just saying theirs, ours, whatever governments, it's not the people. The important thing is when we travel is to be good ambassadors for our country and to respect the people of other countries and to try to make that connection. And I've done that, and it's incredibly rewarding for me, incredibly rewarding to have that relationship not only with Ellie, but with two of her team members. And it's just, it's what life should be about. Mm-hmm. Yes, Rodney. Oh, Vanessa. Did I see something from Vanessa?
Yeah, you did. You saw a suggestion from Vanessa that I said, yes, definitely. Vanessa said, maybe a cooking class in the future for LLI on Cuban food. And we always love the cooking classes. So I told Vanessa, I said, great idea. Let us know if you know anyone who can lead that, Jayne, unless that's you or some friends of yours. But
Ellie, come to Virginia, Ellie. She would be the one.
I'll send you some recipes.
No, I'm the vegetarian, so it was slim pickings for me there. Very slim pickings.
Maybe
we're really looking forward. That's one of the things we miss when we don't have in-person meetings. Just what happens in a class like that, whether it's cooking, whether it's crafting, whether it's art. Some of those have translated online. If you haven't had a chance to look at our fall offerings, we do have 25 courses online, more to come in the spring. But the ones that we don't convene, Jayne, are the ones that just something special happens when people get together. And I know you know this from travel, when people get together and connect over food, as Vanessa mentions.
Yes, Vanessa knows about food in my house. She certainly does. I have a question for Ellie, and maybe I can present this. It seems that the indigenous people in Cuba are kind of melted into the whole entire population. And why was their culture not preserved as other indigenous cultures have been preserved, let's say in the United States or in South America? I can't get answers on that. Maybe you can give me a clue.
Are you referring to the Taínos?
Taínos, sí, yes. Uh-huh.
I think, honestly, that there was just so much influence coming into Cuba at that time between the Spaniards and then the Africans. And I think there was just so much diversity that they kind of just withered. I mean, I hate to say this word, but just kind of started disappearing a little bit at a time.
Okay.
And if you notice today from being there is absolutely zero, but I mean zero, diversity issues in the country. things like racism and things like that are not existent. They're one nation, one country, white, blacks, Asians. I mean, everybody is the same and everybody is equal, which is why when we arrive as Americans, and I often have so many people ask myself or Jordan, hey, how are the Cubans feeling about the Americans arriving? It's magnificent, because the American people is really, of all of the different cultures that visit Cuba, because of course the US was tied down because of the embargo, but the Europeans, the South Americans have always been to Cuba. So for them now to be able to receive the Americans, and because so many Cubans have connections with people in the States, it's amazing. They couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
So for people that ask us often, how are they feeling? The best thing that happens, and you saw it through the streets, Jayne, immediately people are asking, are you American? Are you from the USA? It's very refreshing for them.
Yes, I got a lot of questions about that, guarded questions, but questions about being an American. And they were curious. There was a curiosity about that, but very guarded, of course, because that's part of everything that happens there. Yeah.
I think this is over.
Oh, too bad. Neela.
Be careful I turn it off.
Any other questions that folks would like to ask? And Jayne, thank you for pacing. Last time we had a presentation, we had two presenters. We weren't able to unmute the microphones. We ran out of time. So today it's good to have this opportunity to hear from others. But if there are any other questions, I'm going to pause for a moment, and then I'm going to make an announcement. But I want everybody to have a chance to ask their question.
Just a comment. Great job, Jayne. Enjoyed it
Oh,
very
Jan,
much.
it's so good to see you.
Very
Thank you.
helpful. Yeah,
Thank
loved
you.
it. Anybody, if you want Cuban food, go to Miami. You can get a lot of great Cuban food down there.
Yeah, but COVID. Okay.
Well, not now. We just opened the state. It's going to go away. Come on.
Let's not go there. We're in Florida.
Yeah. But as an aside, I'd just like to say that Ellie and I were planning to do a small trip in this January down there, but of course, because of COVID, that's impossible. We set up a beautiful itinerary, a 2-week itinerary, and so if anybody is interested in traveling with us 2022, please contact me via email or text me. You can get my contact information from Sue G. Be more than happy to share this beautiful country with the rest of you.
And Jayne, I want to join in and thank you for not just volunteering your time, but coming all the way downtown to present here from the Ice House. I hope we made it easy for you.
Very.
And everybody who's connected, I've dropped something in the chat window, but I'll mention it verbally in case you don't see that. You can find a recording of this and all previous Zoomtime Knowledge presentations on our website. Our website is www.jmu.edu/LLI. You may also register for the next presentation in this series that's going to be held next Tuesday on October the 6th. And Jayne, I understand we'll be joined by one of your friends, Rabbi Peter Grumbacher, who will present on sharing the silence. The son of a Holocaust survivor shares his father's story. Everyone, I think that's going to be a great presentation. We invite you back. Thank you all for joining us today. Until next time, be well, take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ellie.
Thanks, Jayne. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes, it was excellent.